Hello, everyone. I'm Holly Thorne, the Community Relations Coordinator for the Stormwater Quality Division here at the City of Oklahoma City. I'd like to officially welcome everyone to the April session of our 2025 webinar series. Before we begin hearing from our presenters, I'd like to provide some information to help enhance everyone's experience during today's webinar. To reduce background noise, we ask that everyone keep themselves muted during the presentation. If anyone has any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them into chat. We will be monitoring that chat for questions, and we will have our speakers answer as many as possible. If anyone would like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, please send us a request via email. We'll place my email address into the chat so you'll have it handy. Each of our recorded webinars will be available on our website as well as OKC's YouTube channel. We'll post a link to the web page where you can find those recordings toward the end of today's session. If anyone has any questions at this time, please feel free to type them into chat now. Up next is the presentation for today's session. Today, we are pleased to welcome Chris Patton and Matt Cronin with Sustainable Gardening Solutions as they discuss sustainable landscapes and some common misconceptions about native plants. Located in North Oklahoma City, Sustainable Gardening Solutions specializes in landscape design, installation, and maintenance, prioritizes the use of native plants tailored to each yard's specific needs, and cultivates their own selection of native plants. Co-owners and operators Chris Patton and Matt Cronin are both graduates of Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma City branch with degrees in horticulture technologies, each with expertise in sustainable horticulture as well as nursery and greenhouse production. With over 10 years of combined experience in horticulture, their goal is to sustainably transform outdoor spaces into beautiful landscapes. Again, if anyone has any questions during today's presentation, be sure to type them into chat. Chris and Matt will be available at the end of the presentation to answer any questions. All right, Chris and Matt, I'll hand the reins over to you. You may share your screen and begin your presentation.
All right, thank you for that introduction. Let's try to share this screen. Let's see. All right, so let's see. Can you see our screen?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. All right, thank you for that introduction. Yes, we are Matt Cronin. I'm Chris Patton, and we own Sustainable Gardening Solutions. We started our business 2 years ago when we were just finishing college. We were trying to figure out what exactly we were going to do with our degrees, and we really saw the trends narrowing in on native plants. All of our friends in the program were all focusing on native plants as well. Lots of the projects were focusing on that just because of how we all found that they transformed our soils and the health of all of that soil microbiology so much better than any exotic plants do. So yeah, that's why we decided to go with this. We've been doing it for about 2 years now.
Yeah, we kind of just fell into native plants as a niche. They kind of found us. We'll go ahead. So why native? Native plants are particularly important for our local pollinators. They have grown up together over, hundreds and thousands of years. So they really, if one plant goes away, then that host plant, those bugs will also go away. They're also drought tolerant, so the really extensive root systems really help keep these plants nourished in times of drought. And they're also low input. Just compost, every other year or so really can keep these plants in check. No synthetic fertilizers needed.
Yes. And then, one of the reasons we don't use synthetic fertilizers on native plant landscapes and sustainable landscapes is because of the soil food web. It is so extensive, and every time you're putting down pesticides you're really harming this soil food web, which gives you free nutrients to your plants versus having to pay to put them down every year or every season.
Yeah, if we want to talk about how fungi and plants interact together, the fungi kind of form together with the roots and will trade carbohydrates for sugars. And so we can freely give these plants what they need just by taking care of the soil.
Yeah, and those fungal pathways also help connect the soil, and that helps the ciliates form, which is kind of like the glue of the soil. That really helps the soil act as a sponge in times of rain, and it really helps soak up everything. You don't have water pooling on the surface of the soil like you might in certain places that have poor soil health, and that keeps the roots nourished for a lot longer.
So water management and erosion control are both huge things that we can tackle with native plants. Really, it all comes down to their root systems. So one of the biggest things about a native plant is its root system. They really are a fibrous and extensive network that both just hold up the plant, but also is the entire area that they're able to grab nutrients from, trade things with fungi, and hold on during winds.
Yeah, it really helps with soil erosion. Everything just really stays in place versus whenever you have a landscape that you may take something out of every year or take it down to the ground. That soil is bare and it can just wash away super easy. Even with exotics that you're leaving over time, perennial exotics, those root systems are really just not as deep. Here's an example of that. So yeah, native plant root systems can go up to 5 meters deep on the big blue stem and even deeper on some others, but that, compared to the native turf grass, which is on the left of this chart, obviously our native plants are going way deeper. They are holding the soil in a lot more than any other exotic plants can, really drawing that water down into the water table.
Yeah, you can see on this the Kentucky blue grass on the left and the buffalo grass on the far right. So you can really see just the absolute difference that a lawn of buffalo grass could provide.
Yeah, and buffalo grass is the native turf grass, great for the sun. And then, yeah, Kentucky bluegrass is the non-native turf grass. And then we've got a little video as well to play. This one really helps showcase how the soil is really impacted, and it really doesn't take that long to get your soil health back to where it can really start taking up that water and control erosion again.
North Dakota, Mississippi, Saskatchewan, home to hundreds of thousands of cows.
See, they're all looking at us now. They know there's somebody different.
And a few bold ranchers who got the guts to change when nature forced their hand.
When my wife and I went through the 4 years of crop failure, I'm sure I was not a pleasant man to be around, in that it was extremely high stress.
We got into financial problems and couldn't make payments, and the bank figured we should sell the land and keep doing what we were doing with the big machinery with less land, where we dug a hole faster.
But my wife and I'll tell you, best thing that could have happened to us, because what it was, it forced us to start looking at the soil.
Since the 1800s, letting cattle roam freely for weeks and months was second nature.
Well, this would be a very typical conventionally grazed situation, and where they're allowed to just keep returning back to the exact same area day after day to graze.
But then you start getting cows eating the same plant all the time, and then they go after the best ones, and that weakens the root system on those. So the poor plants take over. So we ended up with poor and poor pasture every year.
With their pastures dying, Neil's wife insisted he take a class from someone teaching a new way to graze.
I soon found out it was easier to go along and argue with her, so I went for the one day, but I didn't want to be there. So from 98 to 2004, I tried to prove him wrong, and I didn't have much luck. Everything started turning around when I started doing things different. I got different results.
Results produced by grazing that regenerates the soil. Equal parts art and science, with a splash of history.
Our prairie soils were formed by large herds of bison, elk. They would move, they'd graze an area and keep moving, and they might not return to that area for a year, maybe 2 years.
To mimic this herd migration, they break up their ranches into small areas called paddocks.
I'm going out to set up a temporary fence to make a small paddock of 1 acre or less. So I hang a bat latch on the permanent post, and 12 feet away, I found a temporary post and string my wire across, and then I come back and put my step-in pigtails in. And then I go put electricity in the fence, and that's it. I can put one up and down 1/4 mile in 18 minutes. I'll put anywhere from 800 to 1,000 head on an acre or half an acre.
The cattle readily move into a new paddock because they always know they're going to get a fresh bite of grass. And what happens is that at higher stock densities, these cattle feel like things are a little competitive. They figure if I don't get it, my neighbor's going to get it. So they go ahead and grab and bite and grab and bite.
In 2 to 2.5 hours, it'll be either eaten or trapped on the ground.
We graze it, and then we get the heck off of it.
It's ate off pretty good. You'll see some places are a bit shorter than others.
The magic is how long to stay off.
This is an 80-day recovery on this one right now. And that's where I think I need to be instead of anything less.
For several decades, we sort of pushed monocultures in pastures. Plant just Bermuda grass or just fescue. Why? Because it was easy. You were managing for one species. You knew how to fertilize a monoculture. But when you manage a polyculture, a cocktail mix, then that's something that for today's generation is a little foreign.
I'll take you down and show you that cocktail mix that I threw in so we get a picture of it before the cows eat it. This here is black medic. It's a legume, and it puts down nitrogen.
This species right here is called hairy vetch. Very high in protein. It'll be over 30% protein.
I got sunflowers, corn.
This plant here is called Phacelia. That flower attracts the pollinators, and we want the pollinators in our system.
In many areas of the U.S. and in many areas globally, we're seeing a dearth of pollinator insects. And we have found that if we provide the habitat for pollinators, they will return.
Okay, these are sow thistles. They're a weed. But if you eat them when they're just flowering or in the bud, early bud stage, they're higher protein than what the alfalfa is.
My philosophy now is this: if livestock eat it and it provides nutrition to those livestock, it's not a weed, it's a forage.
Some guys might get the spray can out. They want to spray every weed there is.
And the truth is, if I went in here and sprayed a herbicide to take care of these small amount of weeds that we have, I would also be taking care of my red clover, white clover, and all my other legumes in there and getting rid of those. And we're saving money. We're not having to buy a herbicide. We're not having to employ machinery, tractors and equipment to put it out as well.
Why do I want to go out and spend thousands upon thousands of dollars every year on synthetic fertilizer when I can grow these crops for just the cost of the seed? They'll make the nitrogen for me, and then my livestock will come around and eat these plants, convert it to dollars for me to sell. So I'm getting all my fertilizer basically for a profit because I'm making money off of these crops.
These plants are just almost going nuts, so to speak, with photosynthetic activity once we take the cattle off. And that is allowing these plants, as they're rapidly regrowing, to capture carbon out of the air, and put it back into the soil.
Because of overgrazing, overuse of chemicals, and erosion, the amount of carbon in our soils is dangerously low.
I think our whole world revolves around the carbon in the soil because it's those carbon molecules that feed soil life. And it's those microorganisms that feed all the plants, that nourish all the animals, that feed civilization.
Many have thought restoring large amounts of carbon to soil would take centuries. These folks only need a decade, and maybe less.
Last month, we did soil tests on our operation, and what we found is that we've over tripled the amount of organic matter, in other words, the amount of carbon stored in our soils.
Carbon-rich soils soak up heavy rainfall. Carbon-depleted soils don't.
When there was quite a bit of rain, the water would run down the hill and there would be water laying in the bottom of that slough. And now I get better water infiltration. That doesn't happen to me anymore.
In 1993, we could only infiltrate 1/2 inch of rainfall per hour. Now we can infiltrate over 8 inches of rainfall per hour. Think of the ramifications of that. I tell people, it's not how much moisture and rainfall you get, it's how much can your soils hold.
Because carbon-rich soils hold on to water, they help the ranchers weather droughts.
This was seeded 8 weeks ago, and it's only seen 38/100ths an inch of rainfall. Yet look how healthy it is.
The way that we graze these cattle and run these cattle, and with the health of the soil and the health of the plants that they're feeding on, they stay healthy. They don't get sick. They don't need to be treated.
I used to carry a crossbow, 3 big bottles of medicine for treating them. And now out of the 850 head here, I've only treated less than 20 this year.
This particular farm here is about 1,000 acres in size. And in terms of day-to-day activity, building paddocks for the week, moving cattle, you're looking at the person that does that on a day-to-day basis.
I've got more spare time on my hands and I know what to do with. I do a lot of thinking of how to do all these things easier. If I was to start this when I was your age, you know what would have happened? I would have had 15 kids by now because I spent so much time in the house.
This is always the best part of my day. I guess one of the reasons I'm content is because you clearly see they're content. They're happy.
We're still here after 10 or 15 years. And we wouldn't have been if we'd have kept doing what we were. I'd have been flipping hamburgers somewhere.
It's extremely low stress because we're working with nature instead of against it.
My mother didn't think much of it when I first started it. She was pretty upset seeing all the weeds. Now she's bragging to her friends about what I'm doing.
Oops. All right. Go back to that. Okay. So yeah, we're trying to do essentially that same thing, just instead of on the ag side, we're on the landscaping side. So we've seen how those soils in gardens and even yards just get depleted and depleted over the years. So we're trying to bring back that carbon cycle and all that kind of good stuff. So
Absolutely. So on the water use and maintenance needs of native plants, it's definitely less watering than kind of a conventional gardening setup. So we definitely recommend, an establishment period in the beginning when you plant stuff that comes from a nursery. But pretty soon you definitely taper down that water. On the native side of things, you can put plants in where you don't have sprinklers. It's something that you can have, a water truck come by, or just planting at the right season, right before it's, kind of the wetter season, and plants can get established in that. We really highly recommend drip irrigation. It uses a lot less water. It's more effective at delivering that water to the root zone and really getting a deep saturation.
yeah, it helps versus, obviously losing a lot of water to the spray in the air. And then on that watering, we typically recommend watering like supplementally until your garden has had 2 cool seasons of root growth. The cool seasons are really when those plants put on a lot of root growth. So once they can get 2 seasons of that, they've got down deep enough to where you shouldn't need to water them. And then, so our maintenance needs on native plants versus a traditional garden is typically yearly pruning. We usually prune back in the spring, February or March, after the bugs have started to come out. And on plants that you have cut back more before the winter has come, there's hollow stems in those, and the insects live inside those. They also live inside the clumps of grass. Under the bunnies will live under things, all kinds of stuff. So we leave all that debris until February, March.
Mm-hmm. As much as it's insulating those bugs and insects and little critters, it's also insulating the physical soil and those perennial plants' roots. So making sure that we don't have a bare garden going into winter is really important.
Yeah, and then we also like to focus on natural and organic spray treatments. We don't use any synthetics. As we've said before, it really hurts that soil food web. And then as well as that, a lot of these foods or a lot of these plants are edible, whether that's to people or to the birds. So we like to keep all the synthetics off of that. But typically we will add compost to our gardens, usually at least once a year, maybe twice a year. That is really the only additions we really need to add. And then here's some pictures of some typical grass maintenance that we would do in the spring. These get cut back, and then we call the next process dethatching, and that would be where you take your fingers or a rake, you kind of run through this mound that after you've cut it. It removes the dead, truly dead base material that's at the top, and then that allows the plant to have more room to breathe, more room for airflow, and then the plant can then fill in that space where it had died previously.
So these are some of our erosion control favorites. I'll just go through them real quick. We've got buttonbush. It's a gorgeous bush, loves to be kind of near a swampy area, in kind of a lower area where it's going to get those floodwaters. Same for the swamp hibiscus. It's also going to be in the wetland, but they also make a really cute container plant. And then those can actually get pretty tall. We've seen some that are right on the lakefront, be in the 9 to 10 foot range, but generally residentially, kind of in a garden bed or they're like. I'd say they're going to be more in the 6 foot range, kind of maxing out. But then onto the fragrant sumac, that's one that can also get pretty big depending on where it's at. And it almost is never in the wetlands. It's more of an upland plant. And then the northern sea oats, the fish on a fishing pole grass, it prefers upland soil. However, it's a little more versatile. Shade or sun, it can thrive in a lot of different areas. So that kind of brings up the wetland indicator status. I don't know how many people are familiar with this, but it was made up by the Army Corps of Engineers a while ago, and we've really kind of fallen in love. I think that this is the other side of the equation from looking at a plant tag that says that it's full or part sun or full shade. That tells so little about the story of what makes that plant happy. This is the other half of that. So the wetland indicator status, really just from the top to the bottom, the things that are obligate at the top of your screen are almost always going to be in wetlands. And then as we go down through the facultative wetland and upland plants down to just upland, those are never going to occur in wetlands. So this is a really good gauge of whenever you're looking at a project, kind of reading where that water is going to go and how it's going to act. This can really help pick out some plants that would be good for that.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely one thing that can really make or break a native plant design. And I think a lot of people come to us with questions like, well, why didn't this live here? Why didn't this live here? And typically, it's usually because of their wetland indicator status. They just weren't planted in the right place.
So this is a spectrum. The wetland indicator status, there are going to be some that really surprise you, maybe. But it definitely is a great gauge for kind of how to think about a plant and how it wants to be treated by water. Is it going to be okay with being in water often, or does it really want a thorough dry out period in between? So sourcing native plants is another big one that we've been dealing with for a while. Yeah. This is one that's really come a long way in the last few years.
Yeah, we had trouble originally with this in college when we were first getting into native plants. Like a lot of people do, we're like, well, okay, where can we even find these? And through a lot of research and stuff like that, we met a lot of growers at a conference, and we kind of brought up this issue, and we kind of all decided collectively that, yeah, this is really something we need to work on. So we created the Oklahoma Native Plant Network, and that is a conglomerate of, it's a nonprofit that includes growers, landscapers, and designers. And the main goal on that is really like pushing education of natives to the public, and then the other side is on the other side would be connecting landscapers to the growers and the designers, so that whenever you make a design, you can actually source the plant material that you put in your design, because with a native plant design, those plants are really chosen specifically because they could be host plants or keystone plants. Some may be really required because they're blooming at a certain time whenever the butterflies come through, and it has to be there or they're not going to stop. So that is the main purpose of the Oklahoma Native Plant Network. They're a sister shoot off of the Oklahoma Native Plant Society. We've got those QR codes here so you can check out all those websites. And then Okies for Monarchs is also another amazing resource for Oklahomans that are looking to get into natives. They've got so many good things.
Yeah, so Okies for Monarchs has a really cool interactive map that shows all the different growers and nurseries, landscapers, and seed providers that are in the state. It's a really cool interactive map to go look at. They also have a super updated calendar of events that is really thorough. And they also have their collaboration between Johnston Seed and Okies for Monarchs is their Okies for Monarchs mix. It's a really nice mix for filling up space, and a really cheap option to go ahead and get native species out there and covering the ground, and then maybe pick a few plants up at a nursery to fill in, the gaps. They also have a really nice resources page, and
yeah, lots of good land management things on there for anyone in this kind of line of work. So
it's very thorough.
Yeah, check out that page as well. And then another thing that we've heard is like, where can we find native plants that are like a local place for wholesalers or consumers? And so our top list is wholesalers and consumers can go to both of these places, and they are just focused on native plants. So a lot of these companies are relatively new within the last few years, obviously because of this just growing need for native plants in the area and the desire from the consumer. Let's see. And then the lower section is going to be larger wholesale nurseries. And we've been going to these for the last few years with our business, and we've started to notice way more native plants being carried there. Obviously, we're requesting them, we're buying them, so that's helping. But the consumer demand is really there for them. And then we've also got a few local places, like local businesses that are just for consumers. There are places like Commonwealth in Oklahoma City, Leah's Garden, that's her place. We've got Prairie Wind Nursery,
Sanctuary Gardens, Wild Things Nursery.
Yeah, and those are all around Oklahoma. They usually do pop-ups, usually found on the Okies for Monarchs website on their calendar. Let's see, and then some more common misconceptions we hear about native plants.
Yeah, so sometimes I've heard that native plants are not as showy. And for the last few years, taking care of native plants, I can confirm that that is not true. Native plants typically are the ones that bloom first, and they're the ones that keep blooming through our hot summers. They also keep blooming right until we've got snow on them. I have been so impressed with native plants. I think that a lot of my misconceptions from years past have really been proven wrong and challenged. Another thing we've heard is that they're unruly, and while this can be true, I think that simple maintenance, and thinning, timely thinning and trimming is all that requires.
Yeah, one of the main things on that is just choosing the right species, and then the mint family is really the one that is going to spread like crazy. And there's a lot of native mints, and the way you tell is they have a square shaped stem versus like a round stem like most plants do. But those are going to be your real spreaders versus most native plants really aren't going to take over your garden like you might think.
And then native plants are hard to find. This has definitely been true in the past, but as we keep going, it's getting easier and easier. Even nurseries and big box stores are beginning to carry native plants and cultivars of native plants due to increasing demand from customers. So that's really exciting.
Yeah. And then some common mistakes that we see in native beds or in any other beds. I think the biggest one is cutting vegetation back before the final frost. It really just provides a great home for the bugs, all that insulation. And then another thing is that you're really keeping that nutrient cycle on site. So whenever a plant is growing like up through the soil, you see its leaves growing up, it's taking up nutrients from the soil, storing them in its tissues. And then when you're cutting it, if you remove it, you're taking those nutrients off site and then they decompose somewhere else. Whereas with native beds, we like to cut and we like to drop, which lets those nutrients break down onto the soil. The bugs eat all of the leaves, and that makes the plant the nutrients available to the plants.
Yeah. And then design, right plant, wrong place. A lot of what we see is just that plant should have gone somewhere else. So being thoughtful in the design is important, and knowing what species you're dealing with and what it looks like out in the wild is really important.
Yeah, we've definitely gotten a few clients just through design issues that they've had in the past where a plant that they thought was going to do fine ended up taking over most of their beds. So yeah, it really just is about choosing the right species, I think.
And then going back to the leaf debris, we've even brought back the lightning bugs to people's yards, because whenever you cut everything back and bag it all up before winter, and you just send all that off with your landscaping company and they throw it away, or maybe if they're awesome, they compost it. All of those leaves are where the bugs lay their eggs and where the lightning bugs specifically overwinters. So you will not have lightning bugs in your yard if you're just constantly throwing all those leaves away.
Right. All right, and I think, yep, that is it for us. Yeah, that's why we love native plants. Let's see.
Thank you, Chris and Matt. Great presentation. If anyone has any questions for Chris and Matt, be sure to type them into the chat now. I know we got quite a few, so
Yes.
let's go through them. So Alyssa Lusk asked, do you have any information about natives versus nativars?
Ooh, okay, so that's a great question. I'm going to say specifically that that's going to depend on the species. However, there is a difference. I'll talk about a penstemon for my specific example. So the straight species penstemon, it's a foxglove. It's a really pretty plant, but it's a green leaf. There are, I can't remember, I think they're leafcutter bees or ants or something that eats the leaves of that specific plant. Whenever we made a cultivar that's gorgeous, it's a real dark purple color. And so those insects do not even see that plant as the same plant at all. So they don't touch it. They don't eat the leaves. So with cultivars, I guess you asked about nativars. So cultivars are something that we have gone through and selected a real different type of color for either the flower or the leaves, or maybe it's got less pollen. It's like a double flower. Those are types of things that when edited, the bugs aren't going to go to anymore. A nativar is really just a selection. I see one little blue stem that looks really nice and a little bit different than other ones just out in a field. That's not going to really have an impact on whether the insects go to it or not. So that's kind of the information I have just as a little overview.
Okay. Let's see. What kind of Terry Cabo, Terry Cabos. I'm so sorry, Sarah. What kind of clients do you serve? Residential, commercial, industrial, NGO, governmental organization, farmers and or monoculture ag producers?
So I'd say we're mostly residential at this point. We do have a few commercial clients, and that's about where we're at right now.
Yeah, mostly residential. We're doing mostly residential design and maintenance, and then yeah, we do commercial planters as well.
Sarah also asked, what are barriers or perceived barriers for people who are hesitant to switch or incorporate native plants into their yards, beds, or containers?
I would say front yard aesthetics. So
Yeah.
whatever
HOAs. A lot of people are worried about them.
The street that they're on, it's very much like, I don't want one of those native yards that's just absolutely wild to the curb. And so a lot of what we do with those clients is say, we can make that happen. It doesn't only have to be that way. That's really cool. But let's keep it a little tidier here. As to not stick out from kind of the norm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of them don't want to upset their neighbors.
Alyssa, on that same hand, asked any resources for those living in an HOA.
Ooh, there are some good ones on Okies for Monarchs. They have a specific one that is about native plantings within HOA and city rules. It's pretty thorough, and I want to say there might be another resource on that on the resources page of ONPN, but it might be the same one.
Okay. She also asked, can you clarify what you mean by natural or natural/organic sprays versus synthetics?
Yeah. So natural versus organic sprays, we usually use cold pressed neem oil is one of the things that comes from the neem plant. We also use compost tea, which is just a brewed version of compost, made it into liquid so that you get all the good microorganisms in it. Spray that on the leaves and on the soil, and it soaks in. And then the synthetics are ones that are usually compounded in a lab. Most of the time, you will not find any ingredient list on these. They're just like going to tell you the NPK ratio. They're going to be like 3-2-3, and that's all they're going to give you. Versus there's the organic options, which are going to be like bone meal, fish meal, there's fish emulsion, blood meal, all that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of mixes, but all of those will say their ingredients on them, and you'll be able to clearly see what they come from. But they still do have an NPK ratio on them.
Okay. She also had a comment. She just wanted to let you know that she grows that fragrant sumac in her garden, and she loves it, and it's really attractive.
It's one of our favorites.
Yes. Yeah, it kind of has a like a camphorous scent when you break the leaves. It smells good.
And the color in the fall is fantastic.
Yeah. Let's see. The last question is, we have. Oh no, I lost my spot. Not the last question. I apologize, but Caitlin Prather would like to know if she can have a copy of these slides.
Yeah,
totally.
And I know I'm echoing super badly. We're trying to figure it out. We don't know what's going on.
No worries. You're not echoing for us, so.
Oh, great. So Sarah Terry Cabo also asked, can you give examples of keystone plants for Oklahoma or Central Oklahoma region?
Ooh, yeah.
I think, is it Little Blue Stem is a big one.
Little Blue Stem's a big one. Button Bush is a big keystone plant. It's one that you can throw in every garden as just kind of the woody, larger shrub. Let's see. I mean, the native four grasses are all, switchgrass, Indian grass.
Pulling up the list too.
Okay,
We got
good.
plain sunflower, tall goldenrod, white aster, golden crown beard, and then we also have the American plum, which is the native prunus, bur oaks, river birches, box elderbush.
The oaks in general too.
Yeah, a lot of the oaks are good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Alyssa Lusk asked, how would you suggest a large construction project with a lot of area to be revegetated project with a lot of area to be revegetate accomplish the task with natives versus sod, which is fast and available?
Okay, well, it definitely starts on what your slate looks like if you're starting on something that already has any sort of grass, especially Bermuda on it or not. But our favorite go-to is definitely throwing down a thick cardboard. Obviously, try to get one that's not printed on. And then we throw about 3 inches of compost on top of that, and then mulch on the top. And when you can plant directly into that compost, the roots from those plants will drive into the cardboard. They'll make it through. And then about over a year, that compost deteriorates on that soil surface. It drowns out anything that you have, any weeds under it. And then you can keep everything on top that you want. So it's the perfect time to like seed anything. Once you lay down that compost, seed, and then put mulch. And then I think, we got a great mix from Native American Seed Co. It's their wildflower mix for Oklahoma. we throw that down a lot, and it just does really well. It sprouts within, like, I don't know, there's a lot of species, so within a week you see action, and then it's flowering through the whole season.
Yeah, and if you're just needing to revegetate an area, like it's not in horrible condition and it's also not overrun with Bermuda grass or something, then you can just kind of lightly rake and then throw that seed out. Keep it watered. I definitely make sure if you're going to be watering and doing seeds just on top of the soil, that it's a type of soil that is going to be able to take in that water. Otherwise, you might flood the seeds out and kind of, wash them away to a degree. But yeah.
And then on the cost part of that, I think the most you might be spending would be compost, and that's the most you might spend is delivery if you don't have a truck. So it's really not that cost prohibitive.
So I wanted to clarify that question. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay.
Yeah.
For construction sites, they are bare dirt. This is when initial construction is completed, it is a requirement of municipal code that if they establish vegetative cover, it cover at least 70% per square foot in perennial vegetation. And they are typically waiting till the end of the project to do this fast. And so they tend to use Bermuda sod because Bermuda is available and they can just roll it out and be done.
Very true. There's one mix that we really love also from Native American Seed Co. It's their Scorched Earth blend. It's got a mix of grasses and wildflowers that is exactly what it's for. Just that bare dirt, not much going on.
And it will get you to a point where in a few months, whenever, they're, wanting to put in some beds, or maybe they do want some grass somewhere, now those areas are going to be ready to accept plants. Whenever we tend to throw sod down to get it done, there's compaction that's going on. There's issues under that sod. And now we as the homeowner have to kind of water it in for a few weeks and see where the issues are. So that could be a cool thing to, kind of broadcast out the whole thing, seeds, and get it covered quickly.
Perfect. And then 2 questions more. Michelle Chow would like to know if you guys work outside of the OKC area.
Yeah, we're in North OKC. I think farthest we've gone so far is Piedmont. We're in there. We've got a few clients that we're looking at doing in Norman. So if there's interest, yes, definitely. We're all around OKC area. So kind of in the big bubble.
Perfect. And then Sarah Terry Cabo asked, do you have resources or tips on how an individual can determine water flow on their property, or should design only be left to professionals?
So I'd say if you want to, go out in a big storm and watch where the water goes. See how your, area reacts. See where your gutter water is going. And, one of my favorite things is incorporating kind of rain gardens into where gutters spill off. And following that water through the path of least resistance and just putting water-loving plants there. So a lot of times whenever we show up at a place, I'm already looking at where the water is going to go, what the slope is doing, where you might be able to see that there's already some erosion issues, around corners of houses and things. It can be easier to kind of start reading that. And then, as you kind of start paying more attention to that sort of stuff, I think you start seeing some of the minute details.
Perfect. Thank you guys for answering all those questions. You guys had great answers. Remember, if anyone would like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's presentation, please send us an email to request it. I'm placing my email again into chat. Please don't request certificates in the chat because we may not have your email address linked to your username on Teams. I will send out the certificates later this week.
Thank you all.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
And if you all want to email us, if you're looking for copies of the slides, feel free to do that.
Perfect. And as we mentioned, a recording of today's presentation should be available online in the next week or so. I will put that website link in the chat for you guys now. We hope everyone enjoyed today's presentation. We'd love to receive your feedback, so please complete our brief survey by scanning the QR code now shown on your screen. While you are doing that, I'd like to invite everyone back to our webinar on June 17th. We will be hearing from T.O. Bowman and Sarah Terry Cabo with OKC's Office of Sustainability, and they will share information about OKC's urban heat mapping campaign. Until then, thank you all for attending today's session, and thank you again, Matt and Chris, for your great presentation, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, too. Thanks.